Well, this is lesson number 7, and we're going to jump forward to Job 28. Job 28. It's a little cameo, a little poem about wisdom. Job is, in fact, responding, begins in chapter 26, but he's responding to the shortest speech from any of Job's friends, Bildad, and that's in chapter 25, and Bildad runs out of steam after just 5 verses or so. And then Job responds. But in chapter 28, there's a little cameo. It reminds us a little bit of other portions of Scripture, wisdom literature, like the book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us a little bit of some of the Proverbs. What is wisdom? Let's pick up a verse 12 of chapter 28. But where shall wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? In many ways, the book of Job is about wisdom. Where can I get an answer to the question of the problem of pain? Where can I get that solution to the issues that have bedeviled me from the very beginning? Where shall wisdom be found? Not the devil's wisdom, not the world's wisdom, but God's wisdom. There's a battle here, and it's a battle about the heart, and it's a battle about the spirit, but there's a battle about the mind. There's a battle here about understanding. There's an epistemological battle raging in the book of Job. Isaac Watts, in a rendition of Psalm 147, he formed the stars, those heavenly flames. He counts their number, calls their names. His wisdom's vast and knows no bound, a deep where all our thoughts are drowned. His wisdom's vast and knows no bound. Where can I find wisdom? And Job 28 is a kind of an interlude, a poem, a moment of reflection. He's looking for, a meta-narrative. He's looking for an explanation of how things are, of the world, of the universe, of cosmology, to make sense of everything. A meta-narrative that puts, the whole together, not just the parts, but the whole together. What is wisdom? That's a question that the Bible posits. Wisdom literature asks that question. Book of Ecclesiastes, the preacher, sometimes known as Koheleth, using the Hebrew word. The preacher is asking, where can wisdom be found? And wisdom in the Bible sense is, the power to see, the inclination to choose the best and highest goal with the surest means of attaining it. That's biblical wisdom. There's a goal, and there's a means of attaining that goal. And it's the highest goal. It's the best goal. Where can this kind of wisdom be found? Science posits an answer. The universe in which we find ourselves. Let's begin in chapter 28. Surely there is a mine for silver, a place for gold, that they refine. Iron is taken out of the earth. Copper is smelted from the ore. Man puts an end to darkness, searches out to the farthest limit, the ore in gloom and deep darkness. He opens shafts in a valley away from where anyone lives. They are forgotten by travelers. He's talking about mining, going down into the earth, looking for minerals, looking for iron and copper and precious stones and so on. And there are these tunnels, man going where no man has gone before, into the depths and darkness of the earth. He picks up in verse 7, that path no bird of prey knows. The birds in the air, they've never been down in these caves. They're hidden from them. What lies there is unknown to them. Verse 10, he cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams so that they do not trickle, and the thing that is hidden he brings out to light. So here is man, the explorer, and he can find gemstones, and he can find copper, and he can find silver and gold and so on. But where can wisdom be found? You can dig down into the earth and discover these things, but where can wisdom be found? Science has attempted to answer this question. Where can wisdom? What is the answer to the causation of the universe? Where did the universe come from? The Big Bang. Well, what was there before the Big Bang? What caused the Big Bang? What was there a millisecond before the Big Bang? And science, of course, has no answer, because all that science can say is that there wasn't anything. Philosophy. Let's try to answer this question. It is the same question. It asks the question perhaps in a more sophisticated manner, but it's the same question, only it's a more complex question. Think of John Cage in the 20th century, a composer, and he wrote a piece of music. It's a very famous piece of music. It's called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, because it lasts for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It was billed in a concert recently, I noticed. It's total silence. No one plays anything. The orchestra just sit there for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. He was commissioned to write this piece of music. He was talking about, he was trying to give an epistemology. He was trying to give a statement about wisdom. And it's nothing. There is no ultimate answer. There is no big picture. There is no one meta-narrative that puts everything together. John Cage is a product of post-modernity, or what we might call late modernity. And there is no big picture. There are little pictures, but there's no one grand narrative. George Lucas, Star Wars, the latest movie has come out, but we think of the previous movies, Star Wars. And George Lucas says about the meaning of life, there is no why. We are here. Life is beyond reason. That's his philosophy of life. May the force be with you, and so on. Where can wisdom be found? What is the meaning of life? And it's about the force, whatever that is. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, and a little bit of Eastern mysticism and so on. What about the Epicureans? Let us eat and drink and be merry, because tomorrow we die. There's no grand narrative. There's no meta-narrative. There's only now. There's only today. So enjoy it. Make the most of it, because you don't know what's going to happen. There's no big picture. Well, that's the question that Job is asking here in verse 12. Where shall wisdom be found? Does life have meaning? Does it make sense in the face of disaster, in the face of trial, in the face of difficulty? Are we simply subject to blind forces, fate, chance? What do you say when disaster comes, one of these terrible shootings in our country? And Sandy Hook Elementary School as an example. One of these terrible, terrible tragedies that befalls a community, and People are killed, young people, children, high school students, college students are killed. It's interesting, in the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School, Samuel Friedman wrote in the New York Times, "In a crisis, the humanists seem absent." Have you noticed that? In a crisis, the humanists seem absent. They don't come flooding in with their trucks and so on, and offering counseling sessions in humanism to explain the tragedy that has just happened. That there is no God, there is no one meta-narrative. We're all subject to the blind forces of chance in a largely secular society. All the funerals that folk attend. It's interesting that in the Sandy Hook Elementary School, even the president preached what was, well, it was almost a sermon. He actually quoted from 2 Corinthians 4 and 5. The humanist message doesn't work when there's a tragedy, when there's a trial. Humanists have nothing to offer. They've got nothing to say. Does life have any meaning? Does life have any purpose? It's what Job is being forced to ask. It's what you and I are forced to ask when we find ourselves at the mercy of an enormous tragedy, an enormous suffering that is so comprehensive, it is so large that it forces upon us the big questions. Remember back in chapter 18 and being marched off to the king of terrors. This was Bildad. This was his sermon. Remember, before Job gives that peroration in chapter 19, "I know that my Redeemer lives," he talks about being marched off to the king of terror. This is Bildad in his sermon about death and so on, and about death being the great leveler. Death is the great leveler. Everyone is going to die. The rich and the poor, the famous and the infamous. Everyone is going to die. We're here for a season. Our life is but 70 years and 10, and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet it's all weariness and it's all toil. Maybe Koheleth, the author of the book of Ecclesiastes, maybe he's right. Everything is meaningless. Vanity. All is vanity. Life. Work. Play. Relationships. Friendships. It's all a vanity. It's all a mirage. It's a cloud. It's a mist. It comes and it goes. Everything is without meaning. Everything is without purpose. Go back to Job chapter 7 and verse 15. And we read here, in this meaningless life, he says, "What is man?" You see there in verse 17? "What is man that you make so much of him, and that you set your heart on him? Visit him every morning and test him every moment." It actually sounds like a play on the 8th Psalm, doesn't it? "What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you visit him?" Except that Job is asking this almost from a point of view of cynicism. I mean, what is man? Why do you set your focus on individuals, on man? "How long," verse 19, "will you not look away from me, nor leave me alone till I swallow my spit? If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of mankind? Why have you made me your mark?" And so on. He's asking the question, what is life? What's it all about? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What is it that Robert Herrick wrote? Hesperides, "Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be a-dying." Gather ye rosebuds as while you can, because time is marching on. The clock is ticking. The hours, the minutes, the seconds, they go by. And tomorrow we will be dead. And we will be buried and perhaps forgotten. And a generation from now, 2 generations from now, they'll hardly remember that we were ever here. What is the purpose and meaning of life? Job just will refuse to let go of his belief system. Just pop back to chapter 27 and verse 6. I hold fast my righteousness and will not let it go. Now that sounds, you can misunderstand Job and you can say, well, how can anybody say that? But what he's saying is, I'm holding fast to my position here. His argument is that he hasn't committed any particular sin that warrants this particular visitation of judgment, of trial and difficulty. Now, you may have some problems with that. Calvin had lost patience with Job by chapter 27. He had defended him, but now he's losing patience. But don't lose patience with Job. Job is a man that is notorious in the Bible. You've heard of the patience of Job. Well, there's a sense that Job isn't patient. He's steadfast. And I think that word in the book of James, and it's in chapter 5 of the book of James, and we will look at that as a lesson at the end of our studies together. But that word, you've heard of the patience of Job, perhaps should be better translated. You've heard of the steadfastness of Job, the perseverance of Job. In the midst of his trial, he kept on going, like a Duracell battery. He keeps on going. Well, here in chapter 27 and verse 6, I hold fast my righteousness and will not let it go. He has a belief system. And his belief system is that he's a man of integrity. He's a man of godliness. He loves the Lord. He's devoted his life to serving the Lord. He's not sinless. But God himself has testified to this in the prologue. He's corroborated Job's testimony. I hold fast my righteousness. And he's not buying the explanation of his friends, their worldview, that suffering is always punishment. It's always God's visitation of judgment. It's always retribution. You get out of life what you put into it. You reap what you sow. That's the only song they have, and they've sung it to death. They have a terrible argument, but they've made their case very well. And Job has a good case, except that he's arguing it very badly. Right? I hold fast my righteousness. What do you say to someone who's passing through pain and trial and difficulty? And they're godly people. They're people of faith. They're people who love the Lord Jesus. They follow him. They want him to be everything in their lives. And yet these trials come, these difficulties come. And maybe they're saying, what's the point of it all? What's the point of it all? What's the point of godliness? What's the point of following Jesus? What's the point of the gospel? Look at me. Look at what's happened to me. And you're just a hair's breadth away from cynicism. Being cynical about life, being cynical about God. And maybe you're asking this question. Where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Well, let's follow the argument. Verse 13, man does not know its worth. It is not found in the land of the living. The deep says, it's not in me, and the sea says, it's not with me. It cannot be bought for gold, and silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels of fine gold. You can't buy wisdom. You Might be a businessman and an entrepreneur, and you've made millions. You've made billions of money. You've got a private jet and 17 houses in various locations, and you've made it in this world. You're a man who's made it. You're an example of the best of capitalism, and you've succeeded. And you may have been nothing, and now you have everything, and you've climbed that ladder. You've made it. You're one of the great examples of the American spirit, a self-made individual. But have you bought wisdom? Can you buy it? Can you go to a store? Can you go online, put it in the shopping cart, wisdom, and purchase it, and have somebody deliver it in a truck, a brown truck or a FedEx truck, and it comes and it's a box and it says wisdom. And here it is, the understanding of all things, the knowledge of how everything gets put together. And you open it up, and it's a little Amazon that thing that they now sell, and Alexa it's called, and you speak to it, and she tells you stuff, and she can provide you with wisdom. Give me wisdom. Tell me wisdom. And you pause for a second, and a little blue light goes on, and she says, I do not understand your question. He's searching for wisdom. The world is searching for wisdom. Young people are searching for wisdom. College students are searching for wisdom. For the meaning of life. What puts it all together? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What is my function? So Job is imagining this in terms of a mining expedition and so on. Man can do so much. It's incredible what man can do. Does man have wisdom? Does he understand who he is? Where can wisdom be found? And you see Job's response in verse 23. God understands the way to it, and he knows its place. It's a little hint, in fact, as to where this book of Job is actually heading. Where can you find the meta-narrative that puts everything together, that understands even the problem of pain and suffering? And the answer is, God understands it. Job is beginning to see here that man, by his efforts and searching, can never plumb the depths of reality that includes such things as pain and suffering. But God can. And submitting to him, trusting him, is where wisdom will be found.
So Dr. Thomas used a few words that perhaps you have not been accustomed to. Meta-narrative, meta, big, narrative, story, something that gives story that overlines something. It's a very debatable thing, even about the Bible. Some would say the meta-narrative of the Bible is the cross. The meta-narrative of the Bible is the gospel. Like, theologians will disagree on these things. Or some of the questions that we'll get to, he uses some of the terms, so it might be a bit of a challenge. So, given the time we have, I thought I'd just explain each one as we go through. It might help us. Question 1 on our discussion questions. Why do you think John Cage's composition 433 is a postmodern attack on meta-narratives? Well, once again, let's go through some of the meanings of what this is talking about. For example, modernity was known as the age of reason, logic, science, facts, that you could determine meaning things by empirical exposition. Postmodernity is the concept that there is no ultimate truth, that there is no meta-narrative, no big story. Things are only determined from your own viewpoint. And so, with this silence music, he's in essence saying there is no content, that there is no big picture. I actually dealt with John 14 today with the first 6 verses for my message for the funeral tribute for Mama Valdez. And the answers to each of these questions, we're only going to get to the last passage in Proverbs chapter 1, but how is Jesus the personification of truth? How does Jesus represent truth? Without even looking at the passage, you should know this.
He says he speaks the truth.
And he is truth.
Truth and personified.
Yeah, he says, I am truth. He says that. So, well, actually, I kind of repeat myself. So, how is Jesus the personification of truth? He actually says to believe in me. Personify means to represent. So, he's the personification of truth because he represents truth. He explains it through here. How is he the embodiment of truth? Because he says he is truth. And then finally, from verse 12 through 14, how does he evidence that fact that he is truth? How can we believe him?
We have to trust him.
Okay, and why should we trust him?
Because it's Jesus.
Yes, he is. And what reason would we have to trust him?
He did something he did many things which nobody could understand how. That kind of stuff he did, you'd have to be almost like a God or God himself.
So, in essence, by his works, he shows that he is true. So he can be trusted because he says the truth, he says he is the way of the truth, and his deeds demonstrate that he tells the truth. So, let's move on to the next question. Question 2, why doesn't the humanist message help in times of tragedy, and how does the biblical message give hope? Now, I referred to Colossians chapter 1, 3 through 8, and I didn't get the questions right on your outline. So the first question is then, well, what is hope? What is hope?
Hope is a belief that something's going to... Hope is a belief that either someone says something that makes you believe in a better future, or you just believe in something that leads you to a better future.
And
Things get better.
the better future is more than just wishful thinking. It's a confident expectation through the union of Christ. It's actually the answer, the illustration of a lot of the things in the previous question. We can have hope in Christ because he's true. He fulfills what he says he's going to do. Therefore, what he says he is going to do yet future, we can believe on it because on his past track record. All right, next question. It should read, verse 6, what is the evidence of hope? I also could put Hebrews 11, verse 1, which actually defines what faith is. I'll read it for you. Hebrews 11 and verse 1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And guess what? I kind of answered this one in my previous answer. So what is the evidence of hope?
The result, what happens down the road, confirming what the hope you hoped would happen.
The end of your sentence was what?
You see the result of your hope happen the way you hoped it would.
And as Hebrews says, now faith is the assurance, this is another expression of this hope, of things hoped for. the conviction of things not seen. How do we have assurance of things hoped for, of things not seen? Because we can have confident assurance based on the promises of God, the fulfillment of God, the assurance of God. This is the work of the Spirit, helping us to understand, helping us to have confidence in this. And then finally, actually, I only had 2 questions on that. So question 3, what is the significance of Job's illustration of man's search for wisdom as a mining expedition? He starts it off right in chapter 28 in the beginning. So how can the search for wisdom be like a mining expedition? See, if I was making a really corny pun, I'd say that biblically, if you're a miner, you're probably not going to find wisdom because it's something of the aged and not the young. Oh, come on, you got to use your mind on that one. I'm using the other illustration of miner, somebody that's young, as opposed to mining for wisdom. And oh, wow, okay. I really thought you'd like that one. All right, let's just get back to the question. The folks at home are laughing. I'm just going to think that in my head. So, how then can man's search for wisdom be as a mining expedition?
Well, no matter how deep you will go down into earth, and no matter what kind of treasures you will find, it says you will never find wisdom. Wisdom is in God, so it doesn't. It is very well explained.
There is something about the search for wisdom that is like mining.
If you mine God's truth and mine His Word, do you not find riches?
But just take this through the process. Sometimes things on the surface don't reveal the full significance of what they are. Often you have to dig below the surface in order to find more significant understanding. And often some of the greatest riches, even in this mining illustration, take a lot of perseverance, take an accurate assessment of what you're doing. Like if you're going to mine it in a region that's why, for example, miners do samples of the soil. Okay, do we have some gold, for example, that came back in the soil? Do we see a river? They do this with coal and a lot of other things, diamonds. They do assessments. They realize that certain things are in certain areas and not others, geological surveys, etc. So what I'm trying to say in the positive way in relating to mining is that often some of the greatest value, we need to make an effort to get below the surface. Because people often make decisions. What does advertising try to do? It tries to give a surface impression in order for you to buy. When do we get most dissatisfied? When we get the package and we use something for a week and it breaks. Well, this is not what you led me to believe. They just want you to get hype on the surface, buy into this, you have it, and it's a piece of junk. Yet, biblical wisdom, what's the neat part about this, you may find something neat, and hopefully over your Christian lives you've seen this. You come to an understanding, then a few years later, perhaps you get a deeper understanding of that, then you begin to relate that to other concepts. And what's so neat about biblical wisdom, sort of like mining, it's limited by how deep you can go. Well, think about this. Over time, we're going to continue to plumb the depths of the mind of God. And we're going to get a greater and greater and greater appreciation of His mind, what He has done, and a praise because of that. Well, let's get in the final question to Proverbs chapter 1. And invite you. Thank you. And I'm not even a minor. I'm over 18. Okay, well, thank you. All right, one more time. Okay, let's go back. Let's go. If this pastor thing doesn't work out, it might be the nightclubs, right? No, they close those down, so I got to stick to this. Proverbs chapter 1. I invite you to turn there. And we're going to look at just the first 7 verses. So it's talking about the beginning of knowledge, and that's, the wisdom of God, and that's where we're dealing with tonight. So if somebody has it open, would you read Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 7, please?
Here are kingdom revelations, words to live by, and words of wisdom given to empower you to reign in life, written as proverbs by Israel's King Solomon, David's son. Within these sayings will be found the revelation of wisdom and the impartation of spiritual understanding. Use them as keys to unlock the treasures of true knowledge. Those who cling to these words will receive discipline to demonstrate wisdom in every relationship and to choose what is right and just and fair. These proverbs will give you great skill to teach the immature and make them wise, to give youth the understanding of their design and destiny. For the wise, these proverbs will make you even wiser, and for those with discernment, you will be able to acquire brilliant strategies for leadership. These kingdom revelations will break open your understanding to unveil the deeper meaning of parables, poetic riddles, and epigrams, and to unravel the words and the enigmas of the wise. How then does a man gain the essence of wisdom? We cross the threshold of true knowledge when we live in obedient devotion to God. Stubborn know-it-all will never stop to do this, for they scorn true wisdom and knowledge.
So starting with the explanation of biblical wisdom with verse 7, and I'll read what the questions are again. Don't pay attention to what's actually written on your page. So according to verse 7, where does wisdom begin?
We live in obedient devotion to God.
So literally it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. How would you describe what the fear of the Lord properly is?
Unlimited respect that he is bigger than me and I can't beat him in his own game. I fear him because he is God.
I like the word that you use for respect. It's respect, honor, reverence of God. When we understand who God is, there is a respect and a reverence of God. And it's really opening our ears up because the fool, for example, despises wisdom and instruction because they think they know everything. What's the joke to kids now? Kids, quick, move out of the house and get away from your dunderhead parents while you still know everything. It's the whole joke because usually when you're young, you think you know everything. In middle age, there's a few things you don't know, but isn't funny in older age. You realize there's a whole ton of things you don't realize. So let's get to the second question, based on verse 2. What is the relationship with wisdom and instruction? So the key to understanding this is the concept of insight. What's the difference between amassing knowledge and coming to understanding and insight?
Like knowing all the details, like inside the story, like
It's more than details, it's understanding, just the two concepts. So, to know wisdom and instruction, what the basic facts are. To understand means to comprehend what is instructed of you and have insight. For example, there are a lot of people, and this might be one of the difficulties of our education system, that are very factually aware of things. They can tell you how to do a formula or something. They can tell you a date of a battle. They can tell you how to do a science experiment in chemistry or something like that. They can give you factual things. There are those who study a particular field for many years that will know how one thing relates. Say in engineering, you understand the principles of metal, and you understand corrosion, and you understand how different metals have different conductive properties for electricity, etc. Now that's different than understanding, okay, I understand all the facts of metal, now I'm going to build a building. Well, I got to build a different building in an arid climate as opposed to a very damp climate. Got to build a different building if it is, well, anyway, I won't belabor this. So that comes to the aspect of insight. So you may know the facts about something, but can you discern what you're dealing with? What facts do you bring to that situation? What's relevant? What's irrelevant? How do you make a decision properly with what's in front of you? This is what biblical wisdom deals with. Verse 3. How is it received?
If you read the Bible, you get the instructions. It says, wise dealing in righteousness, justice, and equity.
What is that describing? Righteousness, justice, and equity. It's also, it should be don't want to give it away, it should also be an understanding of what you're supposed to do with wisdom. What are you supposed to do with wisdom? I'm so wise, I know so much stuff. Use it. That's exactly it. So if you really understand biblical wisdom, you will act in righteousness, you will deal justly with people, and in equity or fairness. It's application of truth. It's not just given for the amassing of knowledge. Just think about this. Everything that Scripture has given us is not just for our understanding, but it is for our doing. How does it affect our speech? How does it affect our thinking? How does it affect our dealings with others? How does it affect our worship? And on and on. Okay, verse 4 and 5. Who is wisdom for? And it's talking about different categories of people. The simple, the youth, the wise, and the one who understands. So what should this tell you about the nature of biblical wisdom, how it relates to different people at different stages of their life? What is the purpose of biblical wisdom?
Well, to learn more, to increase in your knowledge.
Okay. Yes, there should be learning of more, but related to our previous answers, it's more than just learning. What should it do? Another thing to think of a New Testament concept is the concept of sanctification, progression in holiness. You should be of greater understanding, of a greater biblical maturity, showing wisdom and the fruit of the Spirit the longer that you are a Christian. You come to church not just to amass knowledge or make friends or have different interpersonal relationships week after week. You see, it gets from the simple, just getting to the base level of understanding, to the youth here, just coming to figure out how the world works, to the wise that, okay, I've learned about God and I need to act accordingly, and even the one who understands, it's one to keep going through guidance. This is what, even in all fields, those that progress to a certain degree of knowledge realize there's more that they have to learn. There is more that they have to do. There is more growth that's expected of them. In the Christian life, the moment that you think you've arrived in any way, then you've missed the whole point. Yes, you have assurance of salvation, but there must always be a progression. This is why this is given in these different categories of people are explained here. And then finally, in verse 6, how is biblical wisdom developed? And do you notice it gives the example of a riddle? I don't know if any of you guys do puzzles, or even the concept, hey, this is a little puzzling. When you have a puzzle, something you can't figure out, how do you solve a problem? I was going to say, how do you solve a problem like Maria? No, that's a different show. How do you deal with a problem in its most general sense? You have a problem. How do you tackle a problem? How do you generally solve problems?
Break it down in pieces, study one at a time, keep learning, and apply and try to put it together.
Yeah, I like it starting off with breaking down the pieces. So you first have to ascertain what the kind of problem you have is. Often we even interpersonally, we think we know what the difficulty is with somebody, and we instantly want to go to a solution, but we haven't correctly ascertained the problem. Biblical wisdom often means reflecting on a situation. Am I doing something for the right reasons? Have I made the effort to show compassion and care for somebody else? Have I ascertained what the problem is? Or even, have I ascertained what the resources are for my situation? Do I overestimate what I can do myself, but do I underestimate what multiple people can do together? And then finally, act on that. This is what the whole point of biblical wisdom is that, yes, understand what we have here, what are the options to us, but also act on that. And this is that acting thing where a lot of people are fearful or get sidetracked on that. Any final questions then on the topic tonight of the wisdom of God?
Like the way that fools despise wisdom, and it is so really.
And well, actually, I'll deal with that question. Do you know why the fool despises wisdom and instruction? The simple answer is they think they know everything. Or,
Because they think they're smart.
they think they're smart, they think they know everything, or even worse, what's the point? There's nothing to be learned, it's all uselessness, it's all going to fail. The world's just a big, cruel joke. You've probably heard some of this pessimism, especially if you watch CNN for a few minutes. Don't do that. So, with this, biblical wisdom is to realize there's still something for us to do, still something for us to learn. And there is actually blessing in this, because there's nothing worse. How do you act foolishly? You don't ascertain any of this. You go headlong into it. You make mistake after mistake. You don't learn from your mistakes. Am I making a political statement? Are we making a political statement? Oh, I just had to. You don't learn from your mistakes, and you just keep going through this. Biblical wisdom is to realize who you are, realize what needs to be done, and submitting this unto God in faithfulness. Okay, well, good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.